Hello, welcome to the Career Discovery podcast. On the show today, we'll be learning about our guests' area of expertise, their career journey, and what they wish they'd known when they were just starting out. Thanks so much for watching. We really hope you enjoy the show. Aline, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for being here.
Well, hi, Joe. Thanks for inviting me. I'm really thrilled to be here.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much. So why don't we just get started by you giving us a short intro into who you are and what you do?
Okay, of course. Well, my name is Aline. I'm half French, half Colombian, but I've lived in a few different countries, so I consider myself, from wherever I currently live, and this happens to be Switzerland right now. What do I do? I'm currently a data scientist, and I insist on the currently because I'm a firm believer that life takes you ways and you don't know what's going to be next. So I would say this is what I'm doing now. I've been doing this for about 5 to 10 years. And before that, I was an academic researcher. And before that, I was in the chemical industry. And I don't know for how long I'm going to keep doing this. So that's me.
Okay, thank you very much. And before we get into everything, I'd like to understand, what's your favorite podcast right now?
I'm terrible with podcasts. I'm sorry. I'm more of a YouTube person. Yeah. And because I live abroad and use English as my everyday language, my happy place in YouTube happens to be in French. So I don't know if that's going to be an irrelevant for you, but I try to stay in touch with one-man shows and stand-up comedians in French, because otherwise I just don't know what's happening. And it's also a nice way to also catch up with what's happening in the country without making it too serious, because they're usually pretty good at telling you about the news and stuff. So, yeah.
Yeah. So information and entertainment at the same time.
Exactly.
Sounds good. All right. Well, let's get started. So you're a data scientist. So I'd love to understand more about the common misconceptions about your role. What, for example, would your friends and family think you do all day?
Okay. So, I would say data science is an interesting one, because the term has exploded in the past 10 years. I didn't even know I was doing data science even before I was doing data science. And I think the definition varies according to who you talk to. But for the greater public, I would say, people have in mind things around, are you developing the new artificial intelligence at Google? And, they imagine that I'm doing that kind of fancy stuff where you can read expressions of people caught live in the camera or things like that. The sad reality is that this is not what I'm doing, although some data scientists do that. And the reason for this is because there's many, many industries that are at very different levels when it comes to data science, and the needs are, of course, very, very different. So another common one is that people think that I do coding all day, so that all I do is coding. That's also not true. There's pros and cons to that. And another big one I would say is people think that I can fix their computers. And the answer is I'm not able to do that. So I would say these are the bigger ones,
Okay, brilliant. Well, I can't wait until we take a deep dive and find out exactly what it's all about. Now, you're doing data science in the pharmaceutical industry, Aline. So can you share with us an overview of what the pharmaceutical industry is?
Sure, absolutely. So I would say the pharmaceutical industry is classically about developing medications and drugs in particular that correspond to a specific set of conditions. And why do I say that? Because the number of treatment also has really much exploded thanks to the advances of sciences. So long days are gone where, say, aspirin was revolutionary. Now we're more into things like gene therapy or immune-targeted antibodies to treat cancer, etc. So the company that I work for actually is very, very big on that. And we also do medical devices. So typically, if a specific medication needs to be injected in a specific way by the patient itself, we cover some of that as well. So this is what we do. And why is data science, or why does it fit in the bigger picture? Because obviously there's a lot of data that is generated, not only when you develop the medicine, such as when you start at the molecular level and then you go to humans and then you go to the market. So you need to be able to have an overview of what has been done in the past in order to feed the research of today and tomorrow. But you also need to be doing prevention, and that's my field. I'm actually in a section that is called safety. So we look at not so much the efficiency of the medication, but the adverse events that it may cause. And for this, we either look at clinical studies or we look at what happens once the drug has been accepted and goes out in the market. And when this happens, data science techniques are very useful because all of a sudden, the drug potentially hits a lot of people, a lot more than you would ever have in a small clinical trial. And we need to be able to leverage the insights that we could get from this.
Wow, that's really interesting. Thank you. And so if we've kind of, from a bird's eye view, what's the purpose of data science within the pharmaceutical industry? You know, what do your organization rely on you and your colleagues to do?
Okay, so let's say either we can leverage insights about, I don't know, chemical or biological mechanisms to discover the new drug, or we can try and make existing drugs better, or we can try and make existing drugs more safe. So I would say there are more classical techniques to do this, and this is what people have been doing for the past 60 to 50 years. But obviously, the more data you generate, the more advanced techniques you need to use in order to help with that.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. I'd really love now to zoom in and understand what an average day or week looks like.
Okay, so let's see. Okay, so it can be very, very different from day to day, and this is going to depend on the project that I'm working on. So there are weeks where I have requests that come from our partners in, we call them clinical scientists. So they oversee clinical studies and etc. And usually a typical thing that can happen is an adverse event has been suspected. It can be on Swiss territory, it can be anywhere because we have antennas around the world to look at what our products do. Yeah. And we are requested to understand if this is a signal that we could have found in either one of our studies in the past or in other databases that look at what people take in terms of drugs and how they react. So when this kind of thing happens, it's very much a race against the clock because the deadlines are usually set in stone. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of people working together to produce a suitable piece of information so that the regulatory authorities can make a decision. So when this happens, my week starts with a lot of meetings to understand the problem better. And then I need to catch up with clinicians so that I am sure that the terms I'm going to use for my research are actually correct. Then I would proceed to utilize certain tools that we have in the house to check which data sets that I can look at. And then once I've covered all my bases, I can start doing the statistical analysis. And usually when you're at this stage, there's a lot of back and forth with the people that have asked you to do the analysis, because clinicians and the data sets, they don't use the same language. And I'm sort of in the middle trying to make sure that the translation occurs accurately. Those weeks are pretty intense. But the nice thing about them is that you get to do a full product from end to finish, and then you can move on. And if you have to, say, rerun the same thing a month later or a year later, it's very well documented, so it's a lot easier, right? Now, another type of work that is completely different could also be that I am tasked with helping visualizing events in a certain way. That's much more exploratory. So there, it's not so much, straightforward. There's a lot of exploration, and it can take weeks, it can take months, it can be put on the back burner, it can come back. It's usually at a bit more relaxed pace, except when you need to do a presentation in front of everyone, because this is usually when everybody wakes up, and then you start becoming a lot of emails. So these are, like, I would say, the two extremes. Yeah.
And what might be an example of an event? I'm thinking of the COVID jab, for example. Yeah. Would it be if something went wrong, or?
Okay. So, I'm not sure. Do you mean an adverse event, or?
Yes, an adverse event.
Yes. Okay. So there's certain things I can't share, obviously. But say you imagine we developed a specific drug. I'm going to call it pen, and we think that pen number 2 might be causing more headaches than pen number 1. And then obviously the first thing that you have to do is define headache, because headaches are, they can be experienced in many, many, many different forms. Why do I say this? Because yes, you may think a headache is a headache, but is it pulsating? Is it throbbing? Is it very intense? Do you see things on top of the headache? Is it more like a migraine? Are there additional symptoms, etc.? So this would be an example. It's not really linked to any drug that I can think of, but it already tells you the kind of problems that we have to deal with. Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. And you mentioned that you're using certain tools and programs to do the statistical analysis. Are those programs that the audience might have heard of, or are they bespoke?
Okay, so if anyone in the audience is interested in becoming a data scientist, and as I understand, also newer generations are sometimes embedding programming in their courses. I didn't. So I use programming in Python and in R, which are 2 languages that each have their pros and cons. Python is very, very popular in all things data science. R is also quite popular, but it's more, I would say, statistically precise and academically precise. So these are, I would say, the 2 big ones. That being said, depending on the data set, depending on the person that I'm interacting with, it may be that I may need to familiarize myself with some of the tools they are using in a specific team, because maybe this is the output that they desire. So one thing that can happen is I do the analysis or the model in a language that I know, and then I speak to someone in the team and say, okay, how can we translate this into something that you guys can use? So, I can't give you more names, because I would say those other tools are probably very specific to the industry. And the usage that is being done is very narrow. But these are the ones that I use. If you think of financial industry, there would probably other tools. I used to work in that space as well. But for pharma, these are the ones that I use, at least.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So we've talked about that you have those those kind of regular activities that you're doing in an average week or day. So tell us about something that perhaps happens less frequently. So cyclical events or, activities or responsibilities that you have.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I can think of a couple. The first one that comes to mind is obviously someone leaves the team or someone new comes to the team. If someone new comes to the team, it's kind of all hands on deck because you always want to be sure that the person is correctly onboarded. And also because there's a multiplicity of accesses. This is maybe something that is particular to our industry, but because it's so heavily regulated, it's not always easy to have access to the data that you want to analyze, even though it's within the company. You have to go through a lot of red tape and processes and etc. It's a hurdle, but it's necessary because you want to make sure that everything is protected. And when someone new comes in, you want to help them navigate. So if that happens, it can take up a significant amount of time, of my time, if I'm, being the one that helps. If someone leaves the team, fortunately, this doesn't happen very often. But when it happens, you also want to make sure that all the projects are tied up and that there is someone that is actually catching up on them. I work for a very large organization, so it may be that I don't know exactly what my coworkers are because they are branching out in several different projects. So whenever someone leaves to a different part of the organization or leaves the organization, we also need to be aware of what tasks are pending and who they have to talk to. I would say cyclically, it's hard to predict when, but whenever a project comes to completion, there's always going to be a session when we will present to a broader audience than our stakeholders what we learned for this. And again, this helps bringing awareness to your work. And the big challenge there is that if you don't know who your audience is going to be, you need to be able to speak on many levels because you need to be able to answer to specialist questions, but also more generalist questions that bring a fresh perspective to your work. I would say this happens maybe 4 or 5 times a year. And something that has been happening again after COVID is data challenges. So I never took part in one in this company, but I'm going to take part in one next year. So I'm really excited. And usually it's about, there's a specific challenge and it's not within your exact remit, but you possess certain skills that could be applicable to it. So you form a team with people that you may or may not know. And, you try to see the problem from a different perspective, come up with a solution, and maybe you end up winning a prize or something. But I would say the biggest satisfaction is to see what other people can come up with, because then you can maybe reach out to them and get some inspiration for your work. So these are things that I could think about. And conferences, this is also another one. Yeah.
And what would your role at a conference be? Would it be attending or speaking?
It depends. I haven't been speaking in many conferences yet because, again, we had 2 years down with COVID. The last 2 I attended, one was very much subject matter expertise, and then there was another one that was more about educating myself. So I only attended those. But a possibility could be that if one of our projects attracts attention, or if a data challenge results into an interesting approach, we could be asked to present this in a specialized conference. That happens on a regular basis.
Yeah, that's really great. And I suppose, like you said, with that data challenge, it's an opportunity from you to learn with colleagues outside of your team. And I guess the benefit for the, whoever's setting the data challenge is that they get so many different perspectives on that problem. And sometimes it just takes another perspective to solve a problem, right?
Exactly.
Very good. Well,
and I would say another. Oh, thank you. Another benefit that is also, I think we're having a bit of a lag. Apologies if I speak
Fine.
at the same time as you are. It also allows you to network without being awkward about it. Because I know it's not easy to network, especially if this is your sole focus. There, you're trying to solve something. So to me, this is getting to know people in the organization that you may never have met otherwise. And you happen to have the perfect topic of conversation. So it's never awkward. And this is great.
Yeah. I think a lot of people struggle with networking, even extroverts. And I think, like you say, having a ready-made topic that you're there to talk about can really help with that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very much.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So tell me what you love or find most enjoyable about your work.
Okay. What I like is, I find the topic extremely interesting, because I'm a biologist by training. So obviously, if I measure the progress that has been made, even just from where I was a student, which was, it was some time ago, but not that long ago. It's pretty amazing what we have managed to be doing in, say, the past 15 years. And also the fact that sometimes you just get to analyze a particular data set, asking a particular question. This particular question may have been asked, this particular data set may have been analyzed already, but chances are that the two in combination have never been done in the way that I'm about to do it or that my coworker is about to do it. So in a way, you feel that you are at the forefront of something, and that's very exciting. Yeah, you're constantly pushing those boundaries and advancing the subject. All right. Exactly.
What about things that you find challenging? What would be the most challenging thing you find about your role or your work?
Okay, I would say, I think I mentioned earlier that whenever you onboard someone, one of the biggest hurdles is that there's a lot of red tape for a good reason. This is not something I'm very fond of, although I know it is necessary because it gets in the way. And sometimes systems don't always work seamlessly. So instead of doing work that you would consider exciting and meaningful, you have to be troubleshooting stuff. And it's not always as fast as one wishes. And that being said, it also depends on your temperament and your education. If you're a huge fan of computer science, then maybe these are hurdles that don't bother you as much. I'm more interested in the medical aspect of things, so I don't enjoy fighting with, bits of codes or terminal that doesn't work, things that are very specific to the work that I'm trying to do, but doesn't necessarily work. It's a bit like if you enjoy driving, but you don't necessarily enjoy looking at the engine. And sometimes I have to open the car and look at the engine because something is not working and my hands are dirty and I have a headache by the end of the day, but the car is still not working. I still have to fix it. So again, it depends on what you prefer, but that's something I would like.
Okay. Oh, thanks for sharing that. Looking back on the work you've been doing over the last couple of years, what are you most proud of, or what's been your proudest moment?
What has been my proudest moment? Okay, so maybe I'll add a bit of context here. I hope that's okay. Yeah. So I used to be a researcher in academia, and although I was doing a lot of data analysis, my life was very different because data analysis was a mean. It wasn't the sole aim of my work. Okay.
Yeah.
And I moved to the United States, and I had decided that I wanted to go working into the industry. But I was new to the country, and I had absolutely zero network. And back then, I didn't even know that what data science was. So I started looking around. Fortunately, I had the legal right to work. My visa was allowing that. I just didn't know how to start or where to start, you know?
Yeah.
And this is when I heard about data science bootcamps. They started to be all the rage in the 2010s, 2015s. And I happened to be, 1 hour away from New York City, which was everything was happening there.
Yeah.
So one of the things I'm really proud of was that I actually managed to get into one of those programs, and because they're extremely selective. And it was a great learning curve, because this particular one doesn't necessarily teach you how to do data science, because it's only 7 weeks long. So it's too short to teach you anything. It rather helps you understand where you can get the information that you don't know already. And most importantly, at least for me, it was a great observational study in how to network the American way, and more particularly the New Yorker way. It's very different from what I would be doing back home, and it's polar opposites with, say, the Swiss way. It's completely different. And this is not something they usually teach you, you know? So having had access to that is something I'm very happy with. And I'm also proud that I managed to get into the program.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And actually, can you just share with us the key difference between the New York way of networking and the Swiss way of networking?
Oh, wow. Okay, I'm going to try and not to make this sound as a cliche. I can think of two differences that are major differences. In the US, people tend to use the scale of characterizing things. They tend to be using more the upper scale. It's as if optimism is a bit more pronounced. So, and in Switzerland, you tend to downplay your achievements, as opposed to in the US, especially New York, you have to accentuate them because competition is rife. It's one of the largest cities in the world. So, and if you do this in Switzerland, again, I'm painting with a very broad brush, so a lot of people may disagree. If you do mention all your achievements in an extremely positive light, it could pass as a certain way of being arrogant. So you have to tread carefully, right? Show that you're capable of doing things, but not too much. And of course, it's not so much about doing this, because everybody can say, okay, here I'll turn it up and here I'll turn it down. It's about doing this in a way that doesn't seem off, right? Because you also don't want to overdo it or underdo it. And so this is, I would say this is the biggest aspect.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I think it's a great lesson in, having awareness of the culture that you're operating in, which could help you, navigate that. All right.
I mean, at the end of the day, I just think, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No,
Again,
please,
there's a little lag, sorry.
You go.
No, what I just want to say is, we all know more or less how to read the room, and this is an extreme example of reading the room.
Yeah.
And of course, I don't think it's a matter of completely changing who you are, because, some of us are more, chatty or extroverted. So I don't think that we should change what we came equipped with. It's just a matter of, fine-tuning this. To me, it's almost like fine-tuning an instrument. So you can still play the guitar, but maybe you want to use a specific way of, using your fingers for that particular song, because otherwise maybe it doesn't resonate. I'm not a musician, but my husband has been learning guitar recently, and he's all about that. So I'm making a terrible job at describing this, but that's what he keeps telling me.
No, I think it's really a really great tip. All right, well, thank you so much for that deep dive on data science, and we're going to come back to some more around that later when we think about advice for the audience. But now I'd like to move on to your journey. So, how you came to be in data science, and we've already talked a bit about that boot camp, which I'm sure we'll hear a little bit more about. But how about we kick off with, taking it right back to the beginning? What did you want to be when you were a child?
When I was a child, I really, really wanted to be a medical doctor. And I actually even knew that I wanted to be a surgeon, and more particularly a neurosurgeon, because I thought the brain was super interesting. And I just thought, wow, it's amazing that nowadays you can actually operate a brain and the person doesn't die. So I thought this was really cool. And my absolute idol was Marie Curie, because she was a scientist at a time where a lot of women didn't even have an education. So I thought, wow, how could she? And she was standing in the same room as Einstein and all of that. So I ended up choosing biology for a very dumb reason, and I'm happy to share it with you because it's really ridiculous. I'm terrified of blood. Yeah. So I thought, oh boy, I'm going to go into theater and just, collapse. What's going to happen? So I said, okay, so you know what? I'm just going to do biology instead, which is retrospectively equally dumb because it's the same with animals. So if you don't like blood, well, it's the same. So I graduated from biology. It was very interesting. I had a training in pharmacology, so I got to know a thing or two about how molecules interact with your body. So in a way, it was very much medically related. But I was still a bit, toying with the idea of going back to med school. I worked for a year in a company in France. That was my first job. And I landed the job because essentially I knew a thing or two about chemistry, although I'm not a chemist. My job was to formulate plastics for the car industry that were emitting less toxic compounds. And in the meantime, I was still thinking very hard about medicine. So I started applying. And I ended up actually in the UK. Because the UK has a program that allows you to study medicine in a shorter time that would have been back home. And in Switzerland, I could not study because I was not a Swiss national, and they are protective about this if you don't have certain requirements. This might have changed now, but back in the day, I just couldn't. So I applied, I got in, and this was in Liverpool. And I was still, hanging to my dream of becoming a neurosurgeon. And then I realized, I'm 26. If I want to become a neurosurgeon, I'm going to start working when I'm in my 40s, because it's one of the longest careers that you can ever think of. So I thought, okay, what do I do? So I actually did something I think my 8-year-old self would have just punched me in the face. I dropped out of med school. And I went back to Switzerland to pursue a PhD instead, because it's only 4 years instead of 13 plus. And I chose neuroscience because I really enjoy the brain and everything. And I chose understanding how the sense of smell interacts with your cognitive processes. Once I was done with my PhD, there's usually two ways. You keep doing academic research or you find a job in an industry. And I was interested in the latter. And this is when the story merges with what I said around. This coincided with me being in the US and going into this data science bootcamp. And this data science bootcamp, the outcome is that they help you land a job that has to do with data science, but the industry is completely open. I had applied to a series of jobs that were in relation with my training. One of them was a hospital in New York. But somehow, because you never know where life gets you, I actually landed a job in finance. So far, there's no relationship between me and finance, but it happens.
Yeah.
And the job was to make sure that people that want to invest on their retirement, this is a very common thing in the US because the government doesn't take care of your retirement. I don't know how the situation exactly is in the UK. It's very different in Switzerland. Yeah. So people are finance savvy. If they want to have a retirement, they invest regularly. And our job was to make sure that different users, different generations could be using a website that we were designed so that it could be self-serving. This is very interesting because you get to understand a lot about how people behave and how people consume things. And as a foreigner, it's obviously very interesting because you get an insight on the American way of life. So this was extremely interesting. 2 years into this, we decided to move back to Europe. And the company happened to have offices in Switzerland. So I managed to land a job there where I met yours truly, Joe. Same company, very different job because the way of doing investment in Switzerland is slightly different. And we were also partnering with other countries in Europe. And it's very seldom that, I'm not saying it's not possible, but people tend to trust more banks or insurances or professionals to invest their funds for them. So these were the people we were catering to. Again, lots of analysis, different kinds of analysis, being on top of financial markets to understand what was happening, etc. I learned a lot during, it was 3.5 years in total. I learned a lot during all those years. But what kind of kept coming back was, okay, I know how to analyze this data. That's not the problem. It's all very interesting. But I'm a biologist. So intuitively, if you tell me, I have a headache and I'm sweating, I can start generating ideas or at least thinking of what may or may not be happening to you. I don't possess this intuitive ability in economics. And if you want to analyze data and draw insights from it, opinions may differ, but I think it's easier if you have a bit of a subject matter expertise, because then you don't rely on others giving them your opinion. It doesn't mean you don't ask for them, but you can make the call yourself. That's extremely empowering. Yeah. So I resigned from my job and I landed the job that I'm currently in. I hope this was not too long, but I know I also have a bit of a moving back and forth. It. So
I think it's fantastic. And I think that what's really lovely about it is you take us on a journey around the world, but also from in different industries. And the kind of the continuing thread is your analytical skills, and then your love of biology, or the brain. And I think that's really fantastic, just to see how it is possible to have skills that transfer nicely around the world and across industries and into different roles. And when you mentioned earlier that you were doing data science before you even knew what data science was, right? Yeah. When you were younger and you were, thinking about, neuroscience and going down that path, who were you talking to about those career decisions? Did you have good guidance at that time?
Thank you for asking this, Joe, because I think this is really the crux of the matter, right? When you're a student, one of the things that you keep hearing is, you should go out there and talk to people. And I'm going to be honest, this has always made me a bit mad, right? Because it's like they just plump this piece of information that's completely, it's incomplete. And then it's like, as we say in Switzerland, viel Spaß, and then go have a life. You know, nobody tells you who you should talk to or what you should do or etc. I would say when you're a student at the university, if you want to remain in there, and at least this was the case when I was studying, the path is quite clear. If you want to go outside of it, it's a bit more difficult. So you can go to forums. Sometimes, if you're lucky, your university or the structure where you study organizes them. But what really helped me was actually starting talking to the members of my family, because this was the closest thing that I had to, working adults. And they happen to know other working adults. And, next thing you know, you can maybe talk to someone that may put you onto the path of what you're interested in. So for me, I started talking to my dad, and so he's an engineer. I guess there's a slight overlap because we're both scientists. It's very different.
Yeah.
He works in France. He's worked his whole life and he's in one industry, but he also happens to be a consultant. So he knew a lot about transferable skills, right? Mm-hmm. And again, what lies behind transferable skills is things that you can apply from something that you learn in a very precise context to another. And that's extremely important because that's the other thing that nobody tells you when you're studying, which is you may or may not use some of the subjects that you studied at university or wherever you studied before or after. But what you may use is, methods of working, or maybe you've encountered yourself within a group work and you learn a thing or two about group dynamics, and then you can reapply this. And these are skills that are as much valuable as anything that you may have a diploma from, because you will use them all the time at work. So I would say the more you talk to, people, and again, it can be university professors, it can be students in other years, it could be people around you, or even people from a student job. You really don't know. Just, talk their ear off. I would say it's always important to try and put into words things that you've used in one situation that you may have recycled successfully in another situation, and think, okay, maybe I'm onto something, right? Because these are the skills that are useful to dealing with people, which is what people do at work. I know it sounds very obvious, but that's what we do. So, yes.
Yeah.
I don't know if that answers the question. I feel like I've been on a segue through different questions, but yeah.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. And I think it touches on the importance of what are sometimes called soft skills, which I think are just as important as technical skills, especially when it comes to teamwork and leadership and navigating, the organization or industry that you're in. So thanks for highlighting that, Aline. So when you look back on this career journey, what for you stand out as the highs of that journey? The things that ran really smoothly or went really well.
Okay. I know for those of you who are in the midst of exams, they may think otherwise, but actually, I'm not going to say this is the easy path. It's not, but it's you don't really have to think too much about it, other than, yes, you have to get through your exams, but the path is there, you have to go from point A to point B to point C, and it's just there, it's delineated for you. So it takes a lot of work, but the path is clear. So I would say that was the easy part. Because when you know what you're going to do next, there are obstacles, but in a way, you remove the non-relevant ones.
Yeah.
The not so smooth part for me is when you don't know what next is the next step you should take, because then what do you choose to tackle first? In other words, so that's what it is like for me. Maybe very different for other people. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I think sometimes, like you said, if you know where you're going, you actually just need to figure out how to get there. And like you say, on that path, that the path is clear through education.
Exactly.
Yeah, thank you. What about looking back and thinking about the thing that you found most challenging, or, maybe a failure you had to overcome, or a limiting belief you had to get comfortable with?
Wow, we would need another 3 hours for this. No, don't worry.
We'll do a follow-up.
Oh, no, don't worry. No. Well, there's been many, drawbacks, poor choices. We all make decisions that we regret. But here's the thing, though. I think we should not be too hard on ourselves, because most of the times we make the decision with the knowledge that we have. And I know it sounds very cheesy and cliche, but I've been on the receiving end of many times of this. And then, yes, I could have chosen better, but back then I didn't know how things were going to turn out. One of the things that I regret is, and this was outside of my control, is during my time abroad, I got offered my dream job in my dream company. But I was in the midst of a visa processing thing that was entirely dependent on me staying in the situation where I was. So they held the position for me for about 6 months, but then after this, they could not anymore. And it was extremely, extremely frustrating, because, it's not your fault, but you can't help thinking, oh my God, maybe I should have done something else. Or maybe if I was back home, none of this would have happened. So something I would maybe try and do differently if I could go back into the past is, tell myself, look, you'll be fine. I know this sucks. It's horrible, but you'll get other jobs. It's fine. Same thing, if you miss, it happens. You have to redo your years. So what?
Yeah.
You'll do better next time. And then maybe restudying for your exam is going to be 10,000 times easier than for those who have to do this for the first time, So you can learn from your failures. It's horrible when you're in the midst of them, but you grow from them. And in 2 years, in 1 year, in 6 months, nobody's going to remember that but you. So it's fine.
Yeah.
Move on.
Yeah. When one door closes, another opens.
And sometimes you need to have the door slammed in your face. Otherwise, you don't see the other opportunity, because maybe the opportunity you were pursuing now didn't work out, and maybe it's for a reason.
Yeah.
You'll never know, but maybe it's... Yeah.
Oh, thank you very much for sharing that, Aline. When looking back and applying in the context of what you're doing now, so data science, what education or training was either helpful or essential to be a data scientist?
Okay, so for the kind of career that I'm doing, I would say there's many entryways in data science, because the job definition is so multiple that you will see everything and anything under the label. That being said, it's better if you like coding, for sure. And I would say also, in my case, having a year or two in training in computer science per se would have helped. I'm not saying it's compulsory. It's just that it gives you certain basics that otherwise you have to figure out yourself. It's not impossible. It just takes you more time because, life gets in the way. And I'm seeing this, for instance, in the current team that I am. I'm the least computer science-y of the group. But when it comes to understanding biological concepts, I can more easily draw back from my education. So not all is lost. It's just that I can see the difference between them and me. Does this make me a better or a worse data scientist? I can't answer that question. Sometimes I think, oh my God, yes, it's horrible. Sometimes I think, you know what? Okay, they may be better at coding, but when it comes to selecting certain features, maybe I have an advantage because, I don't know, intuitively, I will know that this variable goes with this variable just because it's the human body. So I know it's hard if you haven't been exposed to, professional opportunity before, but I would say it's a combination between what you really like to do, because you're going to be spending quite some time doing that, and making sure that if what you prefer is, you like coding, but you don't enjoy going down the rabbit hole, that you've got this aspect covered in one way or another, because otherwise it's going to come back and bite you, and you will need to take care of this. So that's why I'm saying, yes, an element of computer science, even if it's only a couple of years, that helps. Obviously, if you're already afterwards and you don't want to go back, there's a whole series of classes that you can take online. They're very good. And some of them are very detailed and last thousands of hours. Some of them are a lot more compact. It's also nice to take them, and I will give Joe a couple links if anyone's interested, just to also get an idea if this is a thing for you or not. You can kind of figure it out pretty quickly. The only thing that I don't know is what the next generation actually has covered already, because my understanding is that coding has become something that people get taught, in high school already in certain cases. So a lot of the things that I'm saying may not be relevant at all. So please take them with a grain of salt if you've already done this.
Yeah. Thank you. That's helpful. And actually, I think what you talked about there around, you've got your biology background. A typical data scientist might have a computer science background. But that again goes to show the power of the team, doesn't it? And having a mosaic of skills and experiences can actually, drive the greatest outcome. Okay. Yeah. What about moving on to those, innate skills or talents or characteristics? Those softer skills that we referred to earlier. What of those do you think have helped you in the work you're doing or this journey?
Okay. I would say I'm generally a very curious person, and it doesn't. It's not just with science. If I meet you, I will want to know everything about you, in and out. So be prepared for questions. I'm kidding, but I want to understand, what you do, where you're from, what you like in life, etc. And I guess this has helped me in situations to try and figure out how to tackle problems. You don't get all the solutions, but at least by knocking on doors, you can find a way of maybe stumbling on the right person. This applies as much during your studies as in industries. I would say the difference with industry is that, you have to do it because nobody is teaching you that stuff. So you learn to just put your pride aside and ask the stupid questions, because there's no stupid questions. I think, learning to read the room is also important, because a lot of people react differently to the same piece of information, or may also express things in a different way. And it's important to understand if the person is upset or frustrated, or if it's just a way of operating. It's 99% of the time it's not personal, but you need to, kind of read between the lines. And I know it's something that seems a bit, what is she talking about? It just comes with time. And I'm sure if you have conversations with your friends, you probably also experience that some people, they may react in certain ways, and, oh no, actually she or he didn't say anything, but it really bummed him or her, or, things like that. It's exactly the kind of stuff that I'm saying. Being flexible is also important. And it's okay to be flexible, but I think it helps to know what you are ready to, up until which point you're ready to accept certain things, and what is your, where are your limits? In terms of, I don't know, how many hours you want to work, but also what you are ready to accept. And be firm on them. It's okay to stand up for yourself. People will only respect you if you do that, obviously in a respectful manner, but having a backbone is extremely important, because I guess my parents' generation tended to have a career in one place or in two places max. And again, the path was drawn out for them. It's very different from my generation. I don't see why it's going to get easier for the next generations. So if you know where you stand, and it doesn't have to be, I want to be doing the same business, it's just your morals, your values. It serves as a compass, because you will encounter those situations where you think, okay, what should I do? And then your inner you knows, right? So follow your gut.
Yeah, absolutely. You touched on two nice things there. I think that reading the room is similar to the, that emotional intelligence concept of, being aware of how you impact others, but also how others impact a room. And then the piece around the values. If you know what your values are, and there are tons of kind of values tests out there that you can identify your values, and they do change over time. But if you know what your values are, and when you're making decisions, you kind of constantly refer back to those values, you'll always be doing the right thing by your standards. And very important. Thank you. Aline, can you tell us a bit about the importance of role models or mentors or sponsors on your journey?
It's obviously a lot easier, or at least it feels less lonely if you have someone that you can talk to for, depending on the time and the point you're in your life. I would say I've had a few people that I would consider as mentors, but it's not always been the case. And maybe, it's not for the lack of trying, but sometimes, there's just not this constellation that happens around you. Maybe, people don't have the time, or the team simply doesn't work like that. It's okay. You will end up finding one. That may not be the person you expect. That being said, when it happens, it's great, and cherish those people like gold, because they're valuable. I can think of two people that fit the definition. One was during my PhD. It was a senior researcher that was aspiring to becoming a professor. He's one now, because he's a brilliant mind, so I'm very happy for him. And although we were not working exactly in the same field, he taught me everything when it came to understanding the human brain and how to model it with a computer. So it's no small thing. And by that, I mean, we spent countless hours going around code, me asking really stupid, idiotic questions, and him being very patient about it. I guess the counterpart was for him, well, he was also teaching. So this was helping him, hone in his teaching skills. And I was also helping him whenever I could, so it's kind of the trade-off. He's actually a really good friend now, and that was really helpful. And thanks to him, I also figured out that I didn't want to go through an academic career, because I saw what he was doing, and it was very nice, but I realized this was not for me. And another person was here for me at a rather difficult time professionally, and helped me see that, what I was saying earlier, okay, well, it's not the end of the world, because you can always find a different job, or you can always find a different team. You just have to put yourself out there a bit. But it's nice to see these being put in practice, and having someone that listens to you and that actually takes you seriously. That's also the role of a mentor, I would say. So by all means, yes.
Thumbs up to mentors. And I think that it was really nice that sometimes you can think of the mentor as of course, somebody you get guidance from, but also someone you might want to emulate. But I think you've just shown us there that actually they can be doing something. You can put yourself in their shoes and think, actually, that's not quite for me, and go in a different direction. But they've still had an equally important role for you. Yeah, thank you.
Exactly.
Looking forward, we've had the pandemic, we've got, AI, crypto, all of these, new technologies coming, the metaverse. What does the future hold for data science, do you think?
Okay, so I wish you had a geekier person to answer this question, but because I will speak in broader terms. I'm not going to mention any, algorithms or AI, because again, I don't work in the AI space. So, but in general, I think there's two aspects of this. In general, I have the feeling that newer generation are a bit more familiar with, whether it be coding, programming, newer technologies. So probably the job title is not going to go away. It's going to become more prevalent and more refined. What we today call data science is going to be split into a myriad of different jobs. I personally would like to move a bit away from programming and just sitting more at a translation level, but I don't want to digress too much. It's just to give a bit of context to what I'm going to say next. I think healthcare is at a tipping point, because we have been doing things a certain way for the past, I don't know, couldn't even tell you when modern medicine starts, but let's put it together with the vaccines. Okay, so that would be 200 years, and we start to realize that things have been done in a somewhat empirical way, because we needed to understand what was happening, and then in a much more systematic way. But what had been overlooked, and not because we didn't want to look at, was all the chain of events that have been happening in the past. We didn't have the technology back then to analyze them, and also we didn't track them. Now we're evolving into a space where data is becoming a commodity, and it comes with its problems. But you also have countries like Estonia and Denmark that are having a system where all your medical history can be accessed from any point in the country. So it's centralized, which means that if you happen to land in ER for whatever reason, it starts with the paramedic being able to see what you're allergic to, which can prove very handy if you happen to be unconscious, things like that. So I think we're evolving towards a stage where we'll be able to understand patients more and more. We will be able to create, I don't want to say the word clone, because I'm not referring to the genetic clone. I'm referring to almost like a virtual clone. I don't know where research is in that stage, but it's the idea that if you can program all the chain of biological reactions that happen in a human system, you may be able to predict how, a person may or may not react to a medication, a person may get sick, risk factors, etc. And I know I'm going towards a lot of generalizations, but we are having the capacity to cross different data modalities, genomics, proteomics, oldiomics, with the medical history and the foresight that we've been accumulating for the past 20 years. So I think it's going to get there, virtual patients being able to predict risk factors even more and more and more and more and more. I'm aware that this is from my very limited standpoint. So I can't tell you anything, again, about AI or all the other nice things you said. But this is something the pharmaceutical industry is working very hard at the moment. The reason it doesn't go as fast as we want is because, we need to change the way we do things. And it has been done in this way for many years because regulations are very heavy. And then there's always the moral dilemma of how do you protect the data that is very sensitive of all those patients? What can you have access to? What should remain anonymous? How do you make sure it doesn't fall into the wrong hands? All those, bordering sci-fi questions that are all of a sudden very real. So it's this constant, navigating between the two extremes. Yeah. And we're right there.
A balancing act. Yeah. Well, it sounds like there's very exciting times ahead. All right. So
yes.
So if somebody's thinking about pursuing a path in data science, what advice would you give them? And where could they find out more?
Okay. So obviously, if you happen to know someone who is, considering this, it's always a good start. If not, things have changed quite a lot ever since I started. I understand there are now degrees in data science, in computer science. So that's the first thing I would start looking at. Why? Because just by looking at what the program may teach you, you could already maybe get a sense if this is for you or not. And bear in mind, it's always nice to have someone spoon feed the things for you, because it means that several people have done their research. It may not cover what is necessary to do all the jobs. No amount of education can, because it's going to depend where you land. But it's a very good start because it gives you the basics. So I would start there. If you're at a later stage in your career, you already have a degree, maybe there are smaller courses. And again, I emphasize education because it's just easier. I was at a summer school last August for, learning a few techniques in epidemiology. Of course, I could have done this by myself, by sitting at a computer, doing my research, etc. But I would have wasted a lot of time, and maybe I would have missed something important. There, I knew I was being taught by experts in their fields who had done the research, who knew that, if you learn what you have in this class, it gives you a good starting point. So that's why I'm emphasizing this. Yeah. Other places would also include, there's a plethora of classes online, and that's even like a more compressed format. And again, I'll give you the links, Joe. I'm thinking of Coursera and Udemy. So this is for the theoretical part. The other thing you can do is look for job ads. And there you have to be a bit patient, because the more you look at those job ads that say data science, the more you will realize that depending on where you look at, it may mean completely different things. And the reality of the industry is that you have people that are specialized in developing new algorithms, and there are people who do artificial intelligence. There are people who do tweak existing algorithm. There are people who build pipelines. Instead of transporting water, they transport data. That's more, I would say, data engineering, but the boundaries are flexible. So if you start, Googling around those job ads, even though, and we had this discussion, Joe, sometimes it's not always easy to understand what lies behind a job offer or a job description. You can still get a little bit of a sense of what happens. And what you will see is that certain terms keep coming back. So again, this is another thing that you can start looking, is what they mean. Or again, go back to, I don't know, your parents or anyone and, just ask them, like throw the spaghetti on the wall and see what sticks, to see if anybody has heard of what this may or may potentially mean. It's very difficult to give you to give you more precise advice for this if you don't have more context, but it's something that actually the data science bootcamp taught me, because usually you only look at the job ads you're interested about. And I know looking for a job is long and gruesome, but actually, if you just enlarge your search a little bit, you may come up interesting things that may not suit your profile, but that may help you shape your vision of, okay, this is exactly what I don't want to do. So whenever I see this next keyword, I'm just going to pass. Yeah. And then little by little, you build a picture of what may or may not mean. And I know I've been talking for quite some time. There's just one last thing I want to add. Whenever you look at those job ads, and I hope you may have a different opinion, Joe, because you've been working in HR, but bear in mind, and this is my personal opinion, I know a lot of people share this, a job ad looks for a unicorn, but the unicorn doesn't always exist. So it's
Very
not
true.
A matter of looking at all your skills, and if one of them is missing, oh no, I can't apply for the job ad. No, it doesn't work like that. Obviously, if you've never coded and you see a job ad about, a computer scientist, well then yes, okay. But it's more a matter of, okay, is this something that I think I'm, 70, 80% away, and are the other skills that are missing, is this something that I feel I could, learn about, or I would even be interested about learning of? And then you can maybe think, okay, I'll give it a shot. There's no guarantee it will work, but you never know. This is how I got my current job. I wasn't exactly fitting the job description, but somehow I had other skills that they found interesting. So that's just my little 2 cents about, when you look at the job ads, don't get horrified because it describes an impossible person. This person doesn't exist. Yeah.
I think that all of those tips are really helpful. So, learning more about the subject matter, looking at job descriptions to kind of, identify areas of interest. And I can imagine, if you enjoy learning about something, and if you enjoy reading about something and seeing more of what is out there, then, listen to that, because that's a sign that this is something that you're passionate about. And exactly. Aline, I totally agree with you on the job descriptions. We do have a tendency to put a laundry list of requirements, and the truth is, you are looking for a unicorn, and you probably won't get a unicorn. And so my advice is always, if you think you've got most of it, or you've got some of it and you could learn the rest, go for it. Yeah. Okay, as we move towards wrapping up, Aline, because I'm conscious that we've been talking for a long time now, I'd just like to get your your advice in a generic sense. So for the listener. So, on the watcher. So thinking back to when you were, starting out, what do you know now that you wish you'd known then?
Well, it's difficult because there's many aspects. May I just return the question to you? If you could maybe narrow it down so that my answer is relevant to the, to the audience. Is there something you could a bit fine tune?
Yeah, so I'm thinking things like, so for example, I'm always, having worked in HR for over 20 years and recruited so many different jobs in so many different fields, I'm almost blown away by the amount of opportunities that are out there. So I left uni thinking that really my only options were HR and marketing, and how wrong was I? So I wish I'd known that there was more possibility out there. So that's probably something I wish I'd known.
Okay, I see what you mean. So yes, absolutely. Doors will open on the way. It's very hard to just predict where the next step is going to take you, because nowadays careers are seldom linear. They can be if you want, if you're in a niche environment, or if maybe you follow a very, I would say, straightforward path, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that nowadays, you can do a lot of things. One of the people when I was a student, decided to drop science to do a manual kind of work. Because at some point that person decided, well, science is fine, but actually I miss doing something with my hands. And, they just trained in the field that they had to train for, and they just started doing their own business. So it's very true. And the thing is, I guess this is also partially shaped by education, because yes, educational structures need to give you, sort of minimal working package that you can, go next. And we've inherited the system where, certain professions were very straightforward. And I'm thinking of, law or medicine, because, you basically went into that field and then maybe did a specialty, but that's what you did. And nowadays there's a ton of different jobs that appear in the market, and there's not a matching education. It's not like a one-to-one pairing. So you can actually do a lot of things. And I think the other thing that happens is, and again, I'm aware the UK may function differently. This is something I discovered in the United States. The culture there is a bit more about what you can do than what you have on the paper. Of course, they will always look at your education and your skills, but you can make a case for yourself to say, well, you know what, I'm willing to try and I'm willing to learn. They're a bit more sensitive to that aspect as compared to where I come from, where you more have to be ticking the right boxes. But this is also changing this side of the pond as well. And what I mean by that is that I hope by the time you guys are looking for a job, companies will have understood that you can get talented people from, a diversity of backgrounds. And this is where I would join what you were saying. There are a lot of opportunities, and maybe your first job is not the ideal thing. Maybe even your second or your third job will not be the ideal thing. But the good news is, before you needed to stay 20 years into a job, then it became 10, then it became 5. That part is also shrinking. I'm not saying please go and hop in as many jobs as you can. But if you don't strike from the first time, it doesn't matter, because you can always try your luck somewhere else and use what you've learned in that particular job. The first one is usually the hardest because people want you to have experience. So it could be that it's also not your lucky shot. Doesn't matter, because you know that in a couple of years you can try your luck somewhere else, and that's fine. And nobody told me that.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think there's a lot of pressure to get the first job right. But I think that sometimes you just have to start. And even if you do a couple of years in that first job and it isn't right for you, well, actually, you now know that's not right for you. So it's not a waste of time. It's you still gain skills and knowledge and experience, and you're still moving forward on your path, but in a different we're really with you there. Yeah.
I feel that the new generations already sense that.
Yeah.
Because when I speak to people that are, 25, 30, it was the case even a week ago. I met with a former neighbor of mine. He's 33.
Yeah.
And he just got a job, which he likes, but he told me up front, I like it. I'm going to stay 2 years here and then I will move on. So already 2 weeks into the job, and probably even before getting the job, he knew he was not going to stay there for a long time.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily a bad thing. If you do a good job, maybe your opinion will change. But companies also know this. It's fine.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. All right. What advice would you give to a younger Aline, that younger Aline who was inspired by Marie Curie and wanted to be a medical doctor?
Marie Curie died doing science, which is what she liked. It was a life of sacrifice. It's a very noble way of leading your life. I like having fun. There's nothing wrong with that. So it's okay. But I guess I was judging myself by impossible standards, because if your ideal is Marie Curie, you're putting the bar really high. There's nothing wrong with that. But it also means that if you don't achieve that ideal, it can be very hard, because there are other ways of doing something really significant with your life, right? So it's fine, again, having ideals. I'm not saying settle for nothing. That's absolutely not what I'm saying. But I ended up choosing another path, and that's absolutely fine. And now that I look back, I don't think I would have had that kind of energy and dedication to sacrifice everything to become the kind of scientist that Marie Curie was, or the kind of scientist that some of my co-workers chose to do. It's a very different life. It has its pros. You have a lot of freedom. Nobody tells you what to do, but you all are also constantly reinventing yourself, and you need to have, you have other challenges, other doubts that can cripple you. It's just that I chose to not deal with those doubts. I have other things I need to deal with in my career, but I feel that I'm more equipped and happier to deal with them. So, if someone keeps telling you, oh, you'll be an amazing ... because maybe you're good at math or you can sing very well, as long as this is something that fulfills you, great. If this is not something that fulfills you, maybe you give it a shot, but if it doesn't work, then maybe you can end up doing something that you really like. And if it's not obvious now, maybe it will become obvious in a couple of years. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. I've got to ask, did you overcome your fear of blood?
Nope. I'm better at it with certain things, but it's funny because during my brief stint at med school, you actually find a way in your head to deal with those situations.
Mm-hmm.
But as soon as I stepped out of the hospital, it was as if, okay, now I'm back to normal mode and I can't. And I actually fainted for real in the theater once. But that was not because I was afraid of blood. It's because I wasn't moving, because you're extremely concentrated. I mean, you're all, gloved up, completely sterile. You're assisting the surgeon. So you're like, oh my God, this is it. And theaters are extremely, extremely warm for some reason. And what happens if you're concentrated, you're slightly impressed and you're not moving your legs at all. Sometimes the blood just stays in your legs, and partly it's particularly true for women. And then there's no blood in your brain. So apparently one of the nurses saw that I was about to faint. She took all the equipment away from my hand and she just threw me on the floor, because that's the only way you can blood back into your head. So I'm going to say it wasn't about blood. Maybe it was about blood. I hope you have your answer.
Oh, thank you for sharing. All right. So what's your favorite quote or your favorite expression?
I don't know if I'm translating it right or if it already exists in English. Tomorrow is another day. It's probably the title of a James Bond movie or something, but we actually have a saying in French that goes by that. And
yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. Thank you.
What about you? What's your favorite quote?
Mine is, now I hope I'm not going to get this too wrong, but they won't remember what you said, they won't remember what you did, but they'll remember how you made them feel. And it's a Maya Angelou quote, and I just think that's and that is so true. If I think back on events throughout my life, positive moments, not so positive moments, you do remember how you feel, and I just think it's so important to make people feel good. So yes, that's mine. All right, Aline, thank you so much for joining us.
I like yours better.
Thank you so much for joining us on the show. I am confident that the audience is going to get so much great value out of this conversation, and I really, really, really appreciate your time. So thank you so much, Aline. Is there anything else you'd like to share before we go?
Have faith in yourself. Again, cheesy, but that's true.
I love it.
And
I love it.
Thanks, Joe. It's been a pleasure, and I think what you're doing is great. So, congrats again.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us today. We really hope you enjoyed the show. If you gained any value out of today's episode, please help us spread the word by subscribing to the podcast. And if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, we would love your feedback. Please use the links in the show notes to get in touch. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.